Cead Fáilte. 1,000 welcomes to Crann beatha short stories and poetry for June 14th. I'm Terrance Ó Domhnaill, your village scéalaí, with more stories and poems from online writers. I have 3 stories and 3 poems this week. We have Chapter 20 of the ongoing story From Beyond the Water Wall, a short science fiction story, a children's story, and poetry for the soul. So gather around once more and let me read them to you under the shade of the Crann beatha, the Tree of Life. So the first story I have, as I mentioned, is From Beyond the Water Wall again, Chapter 20, this one entitled A New Leader by Don Woodby, published again in the Fiction Writer's Den. Spike stormed into the living room while the others were having dinner. "Did you guys see the news?" "What happened?" the fisherman asked. "They just said the vice president was found dead in his house. That this was a follow-up attack of the one that killed Bogus." "That's weird," Mars said, dropping his fork and knife on the plate and quickly swallowing the rest of the fish. "Is there any other group that could have done it?" "Liberation Army," Abby said, "but I'm pretty sure they were also dismantled on the same night we were all raided." "It's pretty clear," Wren said. "It's an inside job. There were always rumors that Aegon just wanted to ascend to power. He's just going to use this opportunity to fast-track his course. Just check the news. I'll bet they will soon announce that he will be temporarily in power to guarantee stability or some other excuse." Spike turned on the TV in the living room. Tanks and other military vehicles formed a line. Full-equipped soldiers spread around, and some government spokesmen were on top of a podium answering questions from the press. Aegon sat quietly, with a very confident semblance, in the middle. They all stopped eating and rushed to the couch. "So in light of the new events, who's going to be in power now?" one of the reporters asked. "We are still discussing how to better conduct everything democratically," an old man in a black suit with a gray mustache spoke on the microphone. "But for now, we will be putting the Secretary of Defense in command to reestablish the order and safety for our citizens." They looked at each other, their wide-open eyes slowly transitioning into a smirk. "Took less than I thought," Wren sighed. The following questions were more about praising Aegon as the new leader than looking for answers. A few minutes in, the fisherman turned off the TV in frustration. "I don't know if this place is going to hold for too long," he said. "You know, this is a very isolated place, but when they search the whole city, they will expand to the surroundings. I don't think this is safe for you all." Abby stared at Trench. "Maybe we should also cross the border." He ambled outside, spinning the keys of the truck in his fingers, without answering her question. Abby ran after him. Her voice could be heard from inside the house. "Are you driving to the city?" "Such a stubborn guy," Spike said. "If he drives that car, they sure as hell are going to catch him." A few moments later, Abby returned, pulling the fisherman by the hand. Spike glanced at them, shook his head, and sauntered back to the room. Wren held Mars' hand, dragged him to their room, and closed the door behind them. "We have to talk to them and decide on a day for us to go," she whispered. "We can't wait any more. It's too dangerous." "I know, but the truth is that I need at least a couple more days to recover. It's not going to be easy to go through that cave. You remember how it was last time. There's no other way. You have to talk to them." "I will, but not now. Tomorrow, maybe. It's late." He changed his clothes and went to bed. "Are you coming too?" "In a while," she said dryly. Next morning, Wren strolled outside and picked up berries when Mars woke up. Ares lay on the floor next to him, and Hades, apparently less afraid of the wolf, sat on the bed, unaffected by his surroundings. Silence ruled all over the place, except for the light noise coming from the TV in Spike's room. Trench and Abby whispered something unintelligible in the kitchen. The smell of curry and fish traveled through every corner of the house. The wolf followed Mars around, wiggling his tail, but they parted ways when Mars entered Spike's room. The kitchen was certainly a more pleasant environment. "Do you think you can move properly already?" he asked flatly as he entered the room. "Yeah," Spike whispered. "I was actually thinking about that too. We need to act fast." "Great. 2 days then. I'll tell Trench." Spike nodded, and Mars left the room with quick steps. "The fish smells great," he said as he walked into the kitchen door. Abby and Trench jumped away from each other at the sound of his voice. 11th time is the charm," he chuckled, and Abby rolled her eyes. "The day after tomorrow," Mars said after a moment of silence. "Would it be fine for you two to take us to the cave? We're kind of in a hurry now with everything that is happening." "I think it's probably the best, really," Abby said. The fisherman nodded and turned back again to his fish stew. As Abby ambled away toward Spike's room to take a look at him, Trench threw a deep look at Mars and walked to the sink to start washing the dishes. Aries followed Mars from the kitchen and over to the yard. Wren lay on the ground with a basket of berries beside her when he sat down and softly kissed her forehead. "It's already set," he said. "We will leave the day after tomorrow." Wren smiled slightly and leaned on his shoulders. Aries sat by them, looking at the river. "So we just have one day left to enjoy," she said calmly. "Do you think we will ever meet each other again?" Mars looked at her and smiled in silence, holding her tighter. They both let go and stretched themselves on the floor. Without realizing it, that spot under the sun, next to the woods, had become their place to unwind. It was the same place they met Aries, and the same place they spent most of their free time, sometimes chatting, but mostly in silence. That day it wasn't different. They napped and chatted, but most of the time they simply lay down, contemplating and rejoicing over their last peaceful day. It wasn't until nighttime that the others came, lit the grill, and sat around it. Tomorrow would be used to plan, but before that they needed to enjoy. The next day, they hadn't touched on the subject until dusk. Granted, no one was awake until late in the afternoon, but each one had their reasons to avoid it. Mars still had no definitive conviction that all of them would fulfill their part of the agreement. Wren, on the other hand, didn't want to acknowledge the fact it would be all over soon. She still hadn't had time to process her grief. At the dinner table, they all ate quietly until Spike finally broke the silence. "Are you prepared for tomorrow?" "I'm fully loaded again," Mars said, pointing at his arm. "Me too," Trench said. "My gun has never been used," Abby shrugged. Wren didn't say anything. She simply smiled. Her flamethrower still had more than half a tank. Trench stood up, walked to his room, and came back after a few minutes. He handed a small handgun to Wren. "If you get tired of burning them, you can use this one too," he said, smiling. Mars' uncertainty had left his mind after that brief exchange. If they prepared themselves, if they were even talking about the subject that freely, there was no reason to believe that they wouldn't go. The only thing left to do was wait and hope that the cave would be less fortified than last time. "Do we have a plan to get past the ships unnoticed if they're there like last time?" Wren asked. "We'll go after sunset," Mars said. "Hopefully it'll be less easy for them to spot us." "I think we can anchor on the rocks near the cave," Trench said. "There is a stone trail that goes all the way over to the beach. If the sea is not too high, we can walk there. If it is too high, we will have to sail to the beach beside the cave, and our chances will be slim." "We can always come back another day," Abby said. "We don't have that luxury," Spike said. "We can hide forever." "After we land," Mars said, "we will try to go unnoticed as long as we can to avoid the heavy artillery on the ships. If we reach the sand, we can fight them one-on-one." They discussed the details for a couple more hours. Spike was the first to decide to go to sleep. Abby and Trench remained in the living room drinking beer. Mars and Wren lay on their bed, chatted through the night, even after the voices in the living room faded. My next story is a short science fiction story, Through a Darkening Copse by David Pahor, published in Illumination Curated. Jack Vance was right. Every hero needs his girl. Or is it the other way around? "I'm not going to lie to you," she says as we rest on the bank of the Appalachian stream after finishing our third Saturday hike. She has the usual pleasant aroma of coriander, lavender, and something else I haven't been able to put my finger on. "I want to use you," she adds. "Excellent," I grin. "As a gentleman, I have waited for you to breach the subject. We've known each other for more than 2 months. She looks at me in the way that had immediately attracted me to her in the company canteen when I joined her group and grabbed the last free chair. While others were discussing intermediate fasting, I asked her whether she had ever read any Jack Vance. Her face is unstirring except for the golden strands of her hair fluttering in the breeze and her bright blue eyes shimmering. She breaks the tension with a ghost of a smile, which is so pure because of its scarcity. No contest here who is the comedian in our fledgling relationship. She sighs. Besides the visual advantage of our good genes, which even I am evolutionarily predisposed to appreciate, there is a second, more pressing reason why your genome interests me. My sense of humor, I quickly interject. Can you please listen? Our non-coding RNA complements each other exceptionally well for the purpose of long-distance trips, with the chronopleter I have been entrusted with. Alone, I can attempt only short jumps. The device folds the innumerable dimensions of a subset of 11 spatial degrees of freedom that are strictly needed for instantaneous travel, and to time, of course. And no, causality is not violated as one arrives at the destination in one's future. I chuckle, appreciating her imagination, if not her knowledge of general relativity or M-theory. Traveling to where exactly? Zurich or Adelaide? She watches my reaction. Oh, more like Andromeda or the Sombrero Galaxy. A wave of dread makes me grip her arm. Who or what exactly are you? I'm as human as you, only somewhat technologically enhanced. I look hard at her, desperately seeking reassurance of normalcy while trying to prevent my thoughts from exploding all over. Her pupils remain deep pools, devoid of deceitful swirls. Allow me to guess. You're also entangled in a conflict. Are you at least on the decent side of it? Years later, I will still be surprised by her line and convince me, but I was always a sucker for pretty women who had perused the 5 tomes of the Demon Princess. How did you... Yes, she pauses, startled, then continues breathlessly. I'll explain everything in the car. Let me say that Vance would understand, and his hero, Kurt Garson, would approve. We sit silently until I have to ask, although it's too soon, but then again late as never. Do you love me? Her smile is no longer a twinkle, but a magnificent glow to rival the sunset skies above. Did I mention that using the transport contraption bonds us forever, she says? I stand up, offering my hand. Shall we depart, my dear? We cross the short distance to my parked Subaru through a darkening copse, and I recognize her elusive fragrance. She smells of faraway, fabulous places. My third story is, as I mentioned in the introduction to today's podcast, is a children's story. And it's entitled The Blooming of the Violet Dusk Oak, Part 1. This tree only blooms once every 10 years to mark the end of spring, and Renee will do anything to see it, by Sarah Fellers, published in Thought Thinkers. The violet dusk oak tree was one of the rarest trees in Asteria, and seeing it bloom was a chance that only came once every 10 years, a grand finale to the end of spring every decade. Renee could hardly wait to see it. Besides being a witch with plant magic, Renee's biggest dream was to be a herbalist. She couldn't pass up the chance to see this treasure, no matter how hard the competition was, or how nervous it made her. Professor Musgrove, who taught advanced magical garden care, fully believed in Renee. She told her so as she handed Renee the application form, and she was met with confused light brown eyes. Application just to join the raising competition? Why is this so exclusive? Shouldn't everyone be able to enjoy the blooming? Renee questioned, her eyes fixed on the daunting form. Professor Musgrave sighed. I wish it could be public, but the land the tree sits on was recently purchased. It's private property now. We should be grateful that the family who owns it is letting any of Bridgefield's students come to see it. Renee's grip on the form tightened. Don't tell me. It's Bobby's family, isn't it? The Beardens. It would be like them to think they could privatize an international treasure. Professor Musgrove leaned forward in her desk chair, making it squeak as she put her hand in her hands, as though the knowledge of who was behind us made her head too heavy. Her massive long black coil spilled onto the wooden desk at her elbows, and she looked up earnestly towards her favorite student. All right, then. If you don't want me to tell you, I won't. I'll just give you the bad news. Bobby entered the competition already. Renee's mahogany complexion lost 3 shades. I'm sorry, she what? How could she already be in the competition? How did she get access to the application form so quickly? She didn't. Her form was waived due to owner's rights. She's already had a full day's head start on everyone else, meaning you, the professor replied. Her voice was calm, but her blue eyes had turned to ice. She didn't like this any more than Renee did. Honestly, don't the two of you have anything better to talk about? Bobby's low croak of a voice sounded from the doorway as she sauntered in. Her black eyes swiveled between the two in the room. She tossed her long, pale blonde hair over her shoulder as she passed right by Renee. Bobby, if you don't mind, I was with Professor Musgrove began. But Bobby was only too happy to cut her off. No one you can't talk with later. Though I would appreciate it, Professor, if you didn't talk with other students about my family's business or mine. Your father made that public business when he bought half of Dusk Oak Park. Your parents knew full well that the park was a refuge for pixies and nymphs. How the city's governor let it be bought, I will never know. It was supposed to be protected, Professor Musgrove shot back. Bobby scoffed. Oh, please. The pixies and nymphs could just move to the city like everyone else. Their standards of living in that park were horrible. My father did them a favor. They'll find real jobs here, make money, and fit in. Isn't that what everyone wants? Being forced out of their homes, Renee fumed. She was sick of just standing there. The violet dusk oak is sacred to the pixies, and the nymphs will be miserable in a place as built up as Albion City. They had jobs in the park that were important. To them and no one else, Bobby fired back. No one I know would choose to be an outcast and live off scraps. Their jobs didn't actually benefit anyone. My father changed that for them. That wasn't your father's choice to make, Renee declared loud enough to shield the knots forming in her stomach. They were so tight, surely they were making noise as they tightened. It is if it's the right choice. Bobby's vampire fangs were beginning to show, stabbing through her upper gums like little knives. Her black eyes were backlit with a red glow. A green light was beginning to shimmer from Renee's hand. She fought to keep her gaze on Bobby. She couldn't back down now, even as her other hand moistened with sweat. Time out, Professor Musgrave shouted, jumping to her feet. None of us are happy with each other. I get it. But if anyone starts a power fight in my office, you get to clean out the broken flower pots and stained glass, not to mention paying for a new desk. And good luck finding another Ashwood that's enchanted to keep track of all my files. Silence befell the three before Bobby muttered something about her flutterflowers blooming early. Then she turned on her expensive high heels and stormed out of the office, leaving the professor to wonder why Bobby was so confident, and Renee to steady her shaky hands. I haven't seen you stand up to her like that. You should be proud of yourself, Renee. Renee shrugged. It's not like it made a difference. Oh, I think it did. Otherwise, she would have stayed and argued some more. Bobby's one vampire who loves drama. All right, I'm going to take a break. And then as I take a break, I'll be back in a couple minutes to read these 3 poems for you. So stand by, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes. I want to invite everyone to listen to Crann and beatha Stories and Poetry every Monday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time on Reese Across America Radio. Search out www.reaseacrossamerica.org/radio by typing in the word Reese in these mobile apps, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, or TuneIn. Or find them on a web browser and join us to listen to the show and support WAA Radio, Whiskey Alpha Alpha Radio for any veterans listening. Reese Across America is a nonprofit radio station that supports veterans programs and organizations that help needy veterans. By joining us at Reese Across America, you are helping to support veterans in need across the U.S. So search us out and enjoy the shows they have to offer, and thank a veteran while you're at it. Now I want to take another minute or so to ask for a donation of any amount to help me keep this podcast going and to advertise my website. I've set up a donation tab on the Crann and beatha Stories and Poetry webpage at rss.com and a donation page on my website at www.crannandbeatha.com, using PayPal for your security. This way there is no credit card info saved anywhere, and you can use any currency you wish from around the world. If you like this podcast, please share it with everyone you know in your social circles, as the writers I showcase in this podcast deserve all the exposure they can get. I created this podcast for them because I love to read their work, and I believe it should be shared with the world. Now I want to explain how to find my website. Since the show is audio only, just take the website name from the podcast logo shown here and search for it. Visitors finding the website for the first time will reach the welcome page to learn a little bit about what's inside. There you'll see a homepage link at the bottom of the page. Click on it if you wish to enter my world. And on the menu bar at the top, there are links at all the pages in the website. Feel free to look around all you want. If you should happen to want to buy one of my books, all the better. Thank you for your patronage and support. Now back to the show. Welcome back. My first poem, I Release the Need for Perfection, Shadows on the Path, by Dave B. He publishes this on his own, no publications. Perfection is a concept, not a reality. True beauty lies in our imperfections. Ever noticed how we often hold ourselves to impossibly high standards? It's like we're constantly chasing this ideal version of ourselves, one that's always just out of reach. Maybe it's time to take a step back and reflect on what perfection really means. Perfection, after all, is a concept, not a tangible reality. We are often our harshest critics. We berate ourselves for not measuring up, for making mistakes, and for not being enough. But what if we shift our perspective? Instead of striving for an unattainable ideal, we can embrace our imperfections and view them as part of our unique journey. Imagine you're an artist, painting on a canvas. Each stroke, whether smooth or jagged, adds character to the piece. In the same way, every flaw and mistake we make contributes to the richness of our lives. It's in these imperfections that our true beauty lies. Life isn't about being flawless. It's about being real. When we let go of the need to be perfect, we open ourselves up to growth and learning. We begin to see each experience, even the challenging ones, as opportunities for personal development. We learn to be kinder to ourselves and more accepting of our human nature. A significant part of this journey involves self-compassion. When we make a mistake or fall short of our expectations, instead of harshly judging ourselves, we can choose to treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a friend. This shift in attitude can transform how we experience life. Accepting our imperfections also means understanding that everyone around us is on their own unique path, with their own struggles and challenges. This awareness fosters empathy and compassion. We start to see others through a lens of understanding rather than judgment, creating a more supportive and connected community. The desire for perfection often stems from a fear of inadequacy or rejection. We worry that if we're not perfect, we won't be loved or accepted. But true acceptance comes not from fitting a certain mold, but from embracing our authentic selves. When we show up as we are, with all our quirks and flaws, we give others permission to do the same. This authenticity builds genuine connections and deepens our relationships. Letting go of perfection doesn't mean we stop striving to improve. It means we approach life with a sense of curiosity and openness, willing to learn and grow without the pressure of having to get everything right. It's about finding a balance between striving for excellence and accepting ourselves as we are. So the next time you catch yourself striving for perfection, pause and take a deep breath. Remind yourself that it's okay to be imperfect. Each moment and each experience is a valuable part of your journey. By releasing the need for perfection, we find freedom and peace in being our true selves. So now for the poem. Shadows on the path. In the still garden, where shadows lengthen, the chase begins, a spectre of perfection. Each step, a brushstroke on worn stone, whispers of a self not found, but formed. Beneath the maple's gaze I pause. How liberating, the fall of crimson leaves, untroubled by their flaws. The pond mirrors clouds, not quite silver, not quite white, a canvas of quiet imperfection. In this embrace of the imperfect, kindness blooms, a gentle touch to the moss, a nod to the crooked pine. With each mindful step, I unbind my spirit, welcoming the journey worn and wonderful. For what is fulfillment, if not the acceptance of each uneven stone on the path we walk? My next poem is entitled Dawn's Reveille. Musings with Melanie is the writer. When darkness yields to light. First rays slice twilight skies, breaking night. A chorus of bird signals morning's arrival. Squirrels scamper, rabbits' nose twitch at the vital rude awakenings as creatures of day take flight. Deer leave sheltered woods to graze dewy green, while neighborhood pets insist on going out. The human world blinks awake, coffee scents about, a new cycle begun, night's languor seldom seen. Yet, as most rise, some still seek slumber's peace, the fowls of moon's watch, forest reclusive breed. Bats fold leathered wings, foxes den in earth's creed. These night dwellers yield to bright dawn's release, trading rest as sun's bright reign now begins. Refreshed by darkness, a new world awakens. My last poem of the day, Whispers of the Soul, by the writer Scribbled Thoughts, and her name is Charlotte Badron. In the hushed depths of my soul I wander, a mystical journey, a path I ponder. Guarding my energy, a precious treasure I keep. In the silence my true power does leap. Curious eyes may gaze, yet fail to perceive, until they witness my growth, until they believe. I cannot blame their lack of understanding, for in this human realm we're all still expanding. In the cosmic dance, each of us plays a role, guided by our hearts connected to the whole. The divine whispers softly, urging us to hold our own embrace. Only in this silence we find our enchanted space. So as I tread this mystic path with courage and might, it is in solitude's embrace my spirit takes flight. For when I truly listen to the universe clues, I discover strength in all that I pursue. So that's my last for this week. I hope you enjoyed the stories and poems I brought to you, and I'll be back again next week with more. Sláinte. Gara Mahagat. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed the variety of stories and poems again this week. Maybe one of them might touch your heart a little. Disclosure for everyone. In order to read the complete stories and poems, you'll need to sign up for a subscription to Medium. If I see a link by the author on one of the stories to allow everyone to read it, I will let you know in the newsletters. Please return again next week for another episode of Crann beatha Stories and Poetry. As a Sean K, I want to continue to delight you with a story or a poem that may bring you a smile or make you think a little bit after we part for the day. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. Long life and fair health to you. Salfada a gúsprech, sláinte chucad. Slán go foil. Goodbye for now.